Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are starting a new series of Shirim today, The Inner World of Redemption. And what we're going to try and do, as we always do, is to try and reach into the future prior to its arrival. We're going to try and borrow the lights from that which is reserved for the future so that we can survive long enough to get to the future. This is the ultimate question that the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh asked along the path, along the journey when they were traveling in the stormy night in a pouring rainstorm that was overwhelming and it was creating mud and everything was messy and everything was chaotic. And the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh was wandering along the path with a number of his disciples, and his daughter Udal was there as well. And Udal, the young daughter who had the capacity and the brazenness to ask her father what needed to be asked, said, Ta, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get to the Kretschmer? When are we going to get to the Malone? When are we going to get to the hotel where we can put our heads down and rest? When are we going to arrive home? It's raining, it's pouring, it's all of this difficulty. And the Baal Shem Tov says, Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to get there. Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to get there. And this satisfies the Baal Shem Tov's daughter for a little bit until a few moments later, or a few minutes later, or a little bit later, she gets overwhelmed again by the terrible rain, by the terrible storm, and she says, Ta, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, Be'ezras Hashem, B'siyata Dishmaya, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're going to get to the Kretschma. We're going to get to the inn. We're going to get to home. And again, more time goes, and Udal comes back to her father, the Baal Shem Tov, and says, Ta, when are we going to get there? It's pouring, it's raining, it's dark, it's cold, it's windy. You keep saying we're going to get there. When are we going to get there? And he says, the Rabbanu Shlalem is going to bring us there. The Rabbanu Shlalem is going to bring us there. And finally, the fourth time, after Udal is so overwhelmed that she comes to the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and says, Ta, when are we going to get there? He says, Be'ezras Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to provide. Hashem is going to get us there. And Udal screams out, but who's going to be with us until we get there? How are we going to make it until we get there? And this cry, this orientation towards the fact that, yes, we know that we will get there. We know that Shabbos will arrive. We know that calmness will arrive. We know that things will smooth themselves out on every element of our experience, both individual and collective. But the patience and the waiting and the anticipation and the yearning and the urgency and the unconsciousness of it all and the impossibility of delaying even one more moment internally and externally gets to a certain degree, reaches a peak volume where we have to ask that second question, which is how are we going to get there before we get there? How are we going to survive the process of getting to that place that we need to get to? And the answer that the Baal Shem Tov reveals to us is that the only way to gain the strength along the path towards the destination that we want to arrive at, when the light of the destination seems so far away and the darkness of the path begins to feel so overwhelming, the only way to move forward is to borrow light of the future and draw it down into the path that is leading us to the future. Because the only way to get to the destination is to utilize the light of the destination. And ultimately, the destination is the revelation that the light of the destination has always already been present with us along the path. And that mindset, that awareness that the light of the future remains at the ready for me to borrow, in spite of the fact that the future has not yet arrived, so that I can find and cultivate the patience necessary of traversing and continuing along the path prior to the arrival. The only way to wait properly for Mashiach, the only way to wait properly for redemption in its private level as well as its collective level, is to borrow from the light of redemption itself, which is the light of that awareness and that patience, which enables me to find redemption even when redemption has not yet arrived. Sha'al na meyamim rishonim. Ask now from those previous days. Sha'al also means borrow. Borrow from those elevated days. We have to learn how to borrow. We have to learn how to live with the credit of the spiritual vitality that we know belongs to us in spite of the fact that it's not present within us right now. We no longer can operate in the economy of only spending spiritually what I have. We need to now borrow upon the credit of our deeply held knowledge of the true capacity of our spirits and the preparation that our soul goes through every moment for Mashiach. We have to borrow from that most refined and elevated point of ourselves in order to find the strength necessary to wait until we get to that place. And so when we borrow from the higher days, when we borrow from our best self, when we borrow from the future, we gain the capacity of viewing the present in the light of the future. Because to view the present in the light of the present, to look at a person's experience in whatever way that exile expresses itself, and we need not go into details because exile is so fundamentally present in every ounce of suffering that any Yid ever experiences, all the more so in a year or in a time period that has kind of contained such a profound level of suffering that it's not even been possible for a person to reflect properly upon it. The amount of suffering, collective and internal, is pashut. We see what's missing. And with everything that we have, it just brings what's missing into more of a focus. What's missing is rachok mimani menachem yeshav nafshi. That light, that smooth light of redemption that seeps into every fabric and fiber of a person's experience, that illuminates it from lowly days into elevated days of sha'al nama yamim rishonim, of to borrow from that light and the redemptive light of knowing that everything is okay. And the only way to get there is to borrow it, is to live as if we have access to the knowledge that redemption will arrive, to the knowledge, to the foretaste of redemption, in spite of the fact that redemption is not here yet. This is the siyata d'shmaya. The siyata d'shmaya of what we're searching for in this series of shirim is going to be, like we've always been discussing, the capacity to draw down, to borrow the light of the future and to draw it down into the present prior to the emergence of the future, so that we can find the strength necessary to persist along the path in the present so that we can possibly arrive at the future. And then this is where Rabbi Nachman's beautiful statement, the fundamental teaching of Zeh, comes into more focus, because what Rabbi Nachman describes as what's going to happen in the coming of Mashiach is that Zeh Hashem kivinu lo. Each and every person is going to be able to look at reality. Each and every person is going to be able to take a look at the clear path in which they've been going through their experiences and the way that they understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their life and the way that they encounter this experience. And each person is going to come with their baggage, their way of looking at HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when Mashiach arrives and when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, what we're going to say is, Zeh Hashem kivinu lo. This expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this expression of godliness, this expression of redemption that is now fundamentally being revealed for all to see, is in truth nothing other than the light of anticipation towards redemption that I experienced prior to redemption. Meaning to say, and again, I'm sorry for the noise that comes in and out. This is the nature of Eretz Yisrael. But the Zeh Hashem kivinu lo, the ability for us to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the fact that you're revealing yourself in a certain way right now in the light of redemption, is exactly how I grasped you in the time prior to redemption, in my anticipation and my patience towards redemption. How could that be? How could it be that the light that a person experiences, that the mode of being that a person experiences prior to redemption will be shown to be the exact same nature as redemption itself? It's only through the belief that we're borrowing from the light of redemption to get towards the place of redemption. Meaning to say that the mindset, the best mindset that we're able to cultivate, the emunah, the bitachon, the goodness, the self-sufficiency, the enoughness, the tekifus, the azis de kedusha, the confidence, the brazenness, all of the best qualities of what it means to have a neshama in a guf, all of that stems from the fact that we've been borrowing from this knowledge, this deeply rooted unconscious knowledge, that a future will arrive wherein everything will be refined and everything will be fixed. And based on that unconscious known reality, my experience in the present has been so fundamentally altered that I have been living in the light of redemption all along. The only thing that has enabled me to get over the Yeush and to get over the Nefila and to get over the biases and to get over the kinatayv and kavod that takes a person out of their world in every moment is to borrow sha'al nama yamim rishonim, to borrow from the light of days, of that original place of redemption and Or Haganas. And when we come to the place where Hashem finally reveals it, we'll say, oh my goodness, this thing that you're revealing right now is the medicine that I used in order to get to this place where you're revealing it right now. Zeh Hashem kivinu lo. Exactly what you're revealing to me in redemption, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is what I now understand I was experiencing back then, although I was not able to fundamentally become aware of it. All we can do is tap into the secret that we know, that the process that we go through in the waiting and the anticipation towards redemption carries within itself the quintessence, the quintessential secretion, the drop, the irreducible essence of redemption itself in a hidden way. Which means to say that when we cultivate a way of trying to live in this tekufa, of trying to get to the next step, of trying to be patient enough to get to the next step and to find the goodness in each and every moment, a person has to learn how to borrow from kochos that are not necessarily theirs. We have to let go of the ego. We have to let go of the sense of self-sufficiency that I am able to do this on my own. Person is incapable of doing anything on their own without the koyach of a Kadosh Baruch Hu that's mashpia on a person at every moment. A person is quite literally incapable of doing anything whatsoever. There were tzaddikim who said that left alone for even the slightest moment, we would find ourselves in the depths of depravity unimaginable to the mind. That was Rav Asher Freund's Chusya Ganalinu's Mahalach. Like David Malka Mashicha, as Chatas, Negdi Tamid, I'm so aware of my deficiency, Rabbanu Shleilim, that the moment you took yourself away from me, I would be the lowest of the low. The Piasatz Rebbe Hashem Yom Kom Doma also spoke in this way. But the recognition is that a person cannot do it on their own. A person cannot base reaching redemption, reaching that place, that point of revelation in the mind, that point of revelation in the moment, that point of revelation in history, based on our own capacity. We have to borrow. And where do we borrow from? We borrow from the past, which is so ancient that it's rooted in what's going to be revealed in the future. We borrow from the Avos. We borrow from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We borrow from Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. We borrow from Moshe, Aaron, David, Yosef, Shlomo. We borrow from the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. We borrow from the Gra. We borrow from the Rashash. We borrow from the Ramchal. We borrow from the Rishonim and the Achronim and the Tanoim. We borrow from our great-great-grandparents and our grandparents and our parents and our siblings and our loved ones and all of the strangers that we meet. We borrow. We take the spiritual vitality, we take the faith that abides in all elements of existence, and we draw it, even though we don't have it, even though we don't hold it, even though we don't know it, even though we can't validate it, even though there's no authentication that validates the faith that I am living in right now, that validates the anticipatory redemptive spirit that moves within the individual at each moment. Even though I don't have the receipts for it, nevertheless, I'm borrowing it. It's not mine. I know it's not mine. When we're able to tap into that mindset, not only do we let go of the ego demanding to be the center of attention that brings about the redemption of the moment, but rather we allow ourselves to be moved by that borrowed light, that we live with a borrowed nature of the future. We know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you're going to reveal yourself. How do we know? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Our grandparents, our parents, the people in our lives that have revealed to us a path of living that is so faithful that it does not need any proof whatsoever to its faith. And when a person can borrow from themselves when they were functioning well, a person can borrow from the Chiddush Torah that they felt, a person can borrow from the good deed that they did 1,000 years ago, or that they plan to do 1,000 years from now. A person has to borrow. We have to get over this sense of spiritual ownership. We have to get over the sense of, I have to own the spiritual strengths that I have in order to benefit from them, because that ship has long sailed. That ship has long sailed. At this point, all that remains is Emunah. We have to borrow Emunah. We have to borrow from the vestiges of the remnants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, from the Rishimu. We have to find that irreducible trace of the light of the infinite that remains even when it departs in its apparent concealment, where Rachuk Mimeni Menachem Meshav Nafshi. I have to look at that Rosham. I have to look at my impoverishment. And at the very same moment, I have to say, I'm going to borrow over here. I know that I have this little nakuda of a trace of redemption, and therefore I'm going to see it as if it's the entire thing. I'm going to borrow 99% of it because I have the 1% of it. And in borrowing the 99% of it, what we tap into is the light of Dor Shirishumos. Dor Shirishumos, as Rav Tzadok says, there's a Roshem of the infinite light, of the concealed light that rests in existence. At every moment, unconscious to the unconscious itself, deeply rooted within the recesses of every Yid's heart and every Yid's mind and every Yid's limbs. All we have is that irreducible point, which is not our own. It's so far from us. But the 99% of knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, we don't have. We have a roshem, we have a smell, we have a memory, we have a remnant of a memory of some connectivity that I once felt, some vadaus that I once felt, some redemptive spirit that I was once fundamentally attached to. But rachok mimeni menachem meshav nashi. But what happens then is that there's a secret of dorshe reshumos. Those who come along and they see the roshem, they see the trace, and they're doresh the trace. They borrow what remains. They borrow based on what remains, all that was once here. They know that was once here was here, and therefore from the remnants of what was once here, we draw down the valid, absolute certainty of faith that what was once here is going to return, as Rav Tzadok describes, that the awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's absence or the lack of redemption in the moment is in and of itself the thing that attaches me to the deepest belief in redemption. Because I'm a doirish of the Rishimos. I understand that there's just broken bones at this point, and that it's like the Gra says that after Churban Beis Hamikdash and after exile from Eretz Yisrael and after the destruction of the Jewish yeshivos and all of these things, the Jewish people are kfar together of Misa. The Jewish people are kfar buried in the kever, and all that remains is the irreducible spark of life, the etzem haluz that remains to be revitalized with the coming of Mashiach and the secret of Tchias HaMesim, which is taking place in each and every moment. But we're borrowing. We're borrowing. We learn that from the light of Pesach. We learn that from the light of Pesach, of a night of She'ela, of a night of borrowing. We borrow from our parents. We borrow from our grandparents. We borrow from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We borrow from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We borrow from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We borrow emuna from you. Rabba emunasecha. Give us the emuna that you know that we have, even though we don't have it. And when we borrow it from you, I live as if I have it. It's not mine. I'm together a shliach. I'm borrowing something. It's a borrowed thing. It's a hand-me-down. And that's why Biza Sayam, the secret of leaving Mitzrayim, had to be by borrowing objects. We had to borrow from the Mitzrayim. We had to say, let us borrow this. Let us borrow this. We're going to return it. Let us borrow this. All of those things, those vessels that we borrowed from the Mitzrayim that we were able to go and get in the times of Makos Choshech, the revelation that the only way towards redemption is to borrow lights from the future that we don't have a capacity of grasping. We don't have a capacity of grasping the lights necessary for redemption. The tzaddikim are osik in that. Our avodah is to be sha'al nam yamim rishonim, to borrow from those days, to borrow. Nafshi b'she'elasi, Rabbeinu Shalom, lend it to me. Lend me the emunah that you have in me. Lend me that light so that I can be patient enough until that light is fully revealed. And that's what we're going to try and speak about in these series of shirim. We're going to speak about cultivating the patience along the path towards redemption. And redemption, again, when we speak of redemption, it's with all of the klalim and the proper understanding of what redemption means in terms of a collective redemption and the historical redemption. That's behesach hadas, and that's the das of only the tzaddikim, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu, Moshe Rabbeinu, train Mashiachin. All we can do is hope. All we can do is matzapa b'chol yom to that geula shlema. All we can do is live with the koyach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who demanded from each and every one of us that we do everything that we possibly can to bring about the actualization of Mashiach and the actual changes, and to believe in that coming of a redemption that rests just beyond the horizon of the mind. And that there are times that are ripe for redemption, and there have always been times that are ripe for redemption, and a time being ripe for redemption doesn't mean that redemption must come in that time, but it means that there's a capacity of redemption in that time. And one way or another, redemption will arrive at that time. The question is, what type of redemption will it be in accordance with the capacity of human beings to properly orient themselves to the moment, which is far beyond human limited kind of volitional choices. There are circumstances in terms of the coming of the Mashiach that are far beyond any comprehension that any human being has the capacity of comprehending. It's l'liba l'fumya legalia, that it's the nekuda of the heart of HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavechel is not revealed to the mouth. The tzaddikim are not capable of speaking about it. The tzaddikim understand the secret of that Mashiach. All we can do is demand it with every fiber of our being, take it from yad mamish, quicker than now, breaking through the concept of time. But the Mashiach and the arrival of Mashiach that we can speak about is going to be the experiential Mashiach within each and every one of us, the redemption that takes place within a person's life each and every moment. Each and every moment the person finds themselves entering into a state of exile, and each and every moment the person finds themselves in the stages of the intimations towards redemption, and each and every moment the person has to open their mind to the possibility of redemption right here, right now. Redemption of the self, karvel nafshi giola. Re'ena ba'anyenu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the exile of the self in the individual experience of the self in its psychological, spiritual, physical postures. That lived experience of the individual in their world, in their akva abiyah, in their mitzias, in their tzimtzum, in their hamshachas akav, in their reality. That secret of olamecha tir b'chayecha. Each and every person has a world, the chelik in Gan Eden, that can be borrowed and tasted in this time. We're not talking about the collective redemption. The collective redemption comes when it comes. The collective redemption comes from every breath that we have and every ounce of our experiences and every factor in our lives being bent towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Driving, eating, walking, working, learning, praying, playing, all of the expressions of the human being from top to bottom, from right to left, every expression of pain, of hope, of anticipation, however it manifests within the spirit of the Jewish neshama, in whatever framework the Jewish neshama is expressing itself, in that context of the concentric circles that it's informed its reality, is a tefillah lamala leor ein soif mamish, a love mamish b'derech midosav. Each and every yid is crying out from the depths of every aspect of their existence towards the Rabbanu Shlalem Higala Na, reveal redemption. That's all that we can continue to do. But the question is the personal redemption. The question is, how do we lift ourselves out? How do we lift ourselves out of the things that hold us down? How do we lift ourselves out of the self-defeating thoughts? How do we lift ourselves out of the yeyush that we're not even aware that we experience on a regular daily basis, because we only know it when our bodies feel so exhausted at the end of the day, or when we don't know why we're feeling the way we feel? How is it that we break free from this stuckness that still keeps a person from moving to the next stage that they need to get to? What blocks that redemption? What blocks that ku'ula? What blocks that hamshacha, that drawing down of a newfound awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in my life? Of a new freedom from some self-defeating belief, of a new freedom from fear, a new freedom from despondency, a new freedom from anger, a new freedom from lack of patience, a new freedom from selfhood, a new freedom from all of the things. Where does that ku'ula come from? And that geula, which we said we have to borrow that light of V'lemecha tira b'chayecha. We're going to speak about all of these ideas. We're going to speak about practical ways of tapping into these ideas, of the sources themselves that speak most clearly about these ideas. But for now, in the process of what we're going to be doing in this first introductory shir, which was a little bit more kind of back and forth than typical, I hope that it's not always this back and forth. But ultimately, I want to end and really begin with a maisa, with a story that we've told over before. We've told this story over before, and this story is ultimately going to be the beginning, the middle, and the end of what we're trying to do in these shirim, of the inner world of redemption, of how a person comes to live with that opening, with that Pesach, with that opening of a shar, of that living by the Pesach lanu shar, b'shas ne'ilah shar, that open for us a gate, open for us that lock, that we're banging at the doors. We're banging at the doors of our minds. We're trying to break free from the limitations. We're trying to break on through to the other side, to find ourselves in more simcha and more yishavadas and more tekifus and tefillah, with more attention, with more kavana. And we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting for the sha'arim of the lave to be niftach. And the question is, how are we going to open up those gates? What are the secret of the pischei sha'arim? What's the secret of Mashiach Tzidkenu, who sits at the sha'arim of Rome? What's the secret of Bezos Yavo El Aaron? Bezos Yavo Aaron El Kodesh. What's the secret of that momentary redemption that emerges? What is the tnua that needs to be made? What movement of the self needs to be made to open the floodwaters of redemption that stem forth from Gan Eden through the Nahar Hayotzim Eden Lahashkos Sagan at any moment? What's blocking us from living the mindset of Kishadam Yodeh Shekol Me'or Esavim Letovato Zosa B'chinahi Me'ein Olam Haba? What's blocking me from living with the das of La'asid? What's blocking me from being more comfortable, from being more aligned, from taking myself more seriously, for being more present to the other? All of the questions that animate and litter the mind of the individual when they are aware that there is something holding the person back. There is something that is blocking me from expressing myself in the next stage of expression. The Iker Tafkid is to express ourselves in the next stage of spiritual expression, to minimize the self and reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu more and more. What's blocking us at whatever station we find ourselves? And the question is geula. The question is geula. The question is what is missing is geula. But how do we get there? How do we get to that geula sanefesh? How do we get to that das that we're borrowing from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? I don't have to question my validity for redemption internally or externally ever. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It is the first thing we say in Shemona Esrei. We say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before I begin this conversation, I just want to let you know, I know somebody that you might know. It's like that protection that we always want to have. Oh, I know this person, I know that person. What we're saying is, Hashem, before we begin this conversation, before I proclaim all of my desires and all of my connectivity to you, and I see you as if I can see you face to face, Kavyachol, Ki'ilu Oimid Lifnei HaMelech, first and foremost, the first thing I want to just say is that I have regards from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I don't know if you know them, I don't know if you remember them, but Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And that's the opening to all things. It's not ours anymore, Hashem. I'm not arguing on my own behalf. I come from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David, Shlomo, Mashiach. And once a yid lets go of the need to be deserving, of redemption, to be deserving of redemption, when we let go of the need to be deserving of redemption, we enable ourselves to find redemption right here, right now, to break on through to the other side, to live, to taste of that future light of all rightness, of the calm, quiet, of Eza Groiskeit, the Eza Shainkeit, what sweetness, what greatness is going to be revealed when Mashiach arrives. The chirping of the birds in the silence of the morning, in the stillness of the air at dusk, whatever the orientation of a person's mind is, that hamshacha of Mashiach, that Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem, that deep breath, that opening of the fist, that opening of the clenchedness of experience, the relaxation of the muscles, the menuchas emes sha'atar etzeba, the shalom pnimi v'chitzoni, the hamshacha of a unifying wholeness that saturates every factor of our splintered experiences. Connection, certainty, a certainty of faith, a faith of certainty, a connection to the moment right here, right now, and enoughness, an ayin ba'ayin. Where are all of those things hidden? How does one reveal them to themselves? So first and foremost, we have to give up on deserving it, and we have to borrow it. We have to borrow the light of redemption. Sha'alna meyamim rishonim, the light of she'ela, light of borrowing from the mitzrim, the light of borrowing the vessels from our best self that will be revealed in the future, borrowing redemption from redemption itself, borrowing emunah in Hashem from Hashem himself. And the next is to believe that whatever we need already exists within us. From the perspective of enoughness, from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hanhagas HaYichud, we understand that the part and the whole are equal, because in truth, each and everything, when you descend down into the core of it, when you dorish the rosham of it, like David HaMelech, that you don't give sleep to your eyes until you find the Makom HaMikdash, and that searching, the Zed Dor Dorshav, that searching, a radical search on the origins, a radical assault on the origins, a sleeplessness at the heart of all things that demands the Evan HaShasiyah, that demands the Nekuda Pnimius of all things, that demands Geula, that demands the Emunah Shlema in Geula Shlema Berega Hazeh. So once we get over being deserving of it, once we get over trying to earn it through our own maisim, as we understand what Avinu Malkeinu is all about, we express every part of why we're deserving, why it is that we should be saved, why it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be there for us. And then we come to the final stanza, which is recognizing that Hashem ein banu masim. Ein banu masim. Do it for your sake. Matnas chinam. We don't deserve anything. The desire for deservedness is a fallen idea. It's only matnas chinam. There is nothing that a human being can do in this world to be deserving of the light of redemption, because the light of redemption is so far beyond what the capacity of the human mind is, that there's no element of behavior that is strong enough to bring it down. So it's just behesach hadas. It's only when I stop trying to calculate where redemption will arrive from that redemption can arrive. And it's only when I let go of trying to be deserving of the redemption of the self that I can actually experience a redemption of the self. And I can open myself up to what always already exists within me. There's an enoughness. Each person has an enoughness. In this moment, each and every person has the tools necessary to uncover Yichud Hashem, wherever a person finds themselves, simply by closing the eyes and attaching oneself to the most basic understanding of what they have, of the most infinite framework of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude and power and all of the elements that we know to be true in spite of the fact that we don't know anything at all. By closing the eyes for a moment and allowing that thought to descend from the mind's eyes down into the innermost point of the heart, and a person lets go of every other desire in that moment. The person gives themselves over to the desire to feel and to connect to this nekuda of emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Mesiras Nefesh of Kabbalah Malchus Shemayim, of being masig, that remnant of faith that remains in spite of all circumstances, at the heart of all circumstances, in the depths of all circumstances, as the expression of all circumstances. And even without words, without knowing, without belief in what we're even doing, when we connect to that place, there's a hamtaka. Everything is nimtak. There's yeshin yan sheyitapech kol in the closing of the eyes when a person descends down into that innermost point of the makom hamikdash, the makom ha'aron enam minamida, that place that is placeless within the self, because it can't be proven even by the self itself. It's borrowed from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. All I know is that I have it. I don't know how I have it. I borrowed this. I didn't earn this thing. I borrowed it. When a person knows that it's borrowed, when it's a light of she'ela, which is gematria purim, which is a matnas chinam, which is what comes about of ad lo yada, when a person lets go of even trying to know the difference between Haman and Mordechai, and what's right and what's wrong, and what's the right way to do things and what's the wrong way to do things, or how Mashiach is going to arrive and how it's not going to arrive. There's a bilbul hamoichin ad b'li dai. The only way above it is to go to that straight path of ad lo yada, that light of she'ela, that light of asking. This is why we learn Gemara so much, to learn how to ask a question, to learn how to borrow an idea, to learn how to borrow a certainty in spite of the fact that I don't have certainty. When a person borrows and a person descends down deep into it, in that moment, hakol yimtak, and in that moment, in that moment, if a person has amuna in their experience, Hashem is right there. And even though we're not at the krachma yet, and even though we're not at the in yet, and we're still like Udal, who's bothered by the rain and the struggle and the difficulty and the stormy night, nevertheless, we live with that light of forcing the Baal Shem Tov to tell us that Hashem is going to help us get there until we get there, that we can borrow from the future. And the story that ultimately all of this is about and where this light comes from is the story of Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, the Pri Haaretz. The Pri Haaretz, Eretz Yisrael is the light of Emunah. Eretz Yisrael is the Toiv Haaretz Ma'oid Ma'oid. It's connected to the Ma'oid Ma'oid Have Shachal Ruach. Ma'oid Ma'oid Have Shachal Ruach. There's a Ma'oid Ma'oid, there's a Gzera Shava that Rav Menachem Mendel made. The Gzera Shava is that Ma'oid Ma'oid Have Shachal Ruach, that a person has to make themselves small, 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 realize that I'm undeserving because everything is a matnas chinam, and that's where redemption is going to come from, and that's connected to the Ma'oid Ma'oid of Eretz Yisrael, Toiva Haaretz Ma'oid Ma'oid. That it's only when a person is mavata themselves, only when a person taps into that emunah l'mala mitam v'das, and the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah orientation of our emunah that's borrowed. It's borrowed from the shemos of Hakadosh Baruch Hu that pre-exist us. Only then are we able to tap into that light. In that ma'oid, in that recognition of the shiftless, we're able to tap into the zchus of the emunah of Eretz Yisrael. And that ma'oid is also connected to another ma'oid, which is the Gesher Tzar ma'oid of Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman doesn't say there's a Gesher Tzar ma'od, a very narrow bridge, but rather it's a Gesher Tzar ma'od. It's a very, very narrow bridge. So now we have three ksuvim that are connected. We have ma'oid have shafar ruach, that a person should be very, very humble in spirit. A person should borrow. A person should learn how to beg. A person should be like David HaMelech of Leis Lemagar Meklum. I have absolutely nothing of my own. I don't even have soles to my shoes. I might have golden-looking shoes, but I don't even have soles to my shoes. And like David HaMelech, we learn to borrow, we learn to ask, we learn to borrow from things beyond us. And that's Ma'oid Have Shafar Ruach. And that's what gives us the ability to walk along the Gesher Tzar Ma'oid, the very, very narrow bridge, which is the transition from prior to Geula towards the Geula of Toiv Haaretz Ma'oid. And so it's specifically within this letting go of the self and feeling that I'm deserving of redemption that I gain the ability to believe enough in the redemptive capacity that always already exists in the depths of my mind. It comes with the shiftless, it comes with the bittul. It comes with the recognition that I'm not in control. And Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, whose yard said it is tomorrow, I believe. The Heilig of Rav Menachem Mendel, when he came to Tveria, when he finally came to Tveria, when he understood that the path of Ma'oid Have Shafal Ruach, which I learned from the Baal Shem Tov, over the bridge of Gesher Tzar Ma'oid, as we know that Rabbi Nachman met the neshama of Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk on the way to Eretz Yisrael, and he taught him the name necessary for calming the stormy sea, which is Ata, which is seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu face to face, realizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here with me at every moment, and I can bring Geula right here, right now, even in the stormy sea. And that brings a person to Toiv Haaretz Ma'oid, that the land is very, very good, that land of redemption, that place of redemption in the mind and in the Aretz itself. And when Rav Menachem Mendel came, so he went out, he realized he didn't have fish for Shabbos. The tzaddikim need to eat fish for Shabbos. Why did the tzaddikim need to eat fish for Shabbos? Because a dag is a dalid and a gimel. It's a 4 and a 3. What's the dalid and the gimel? The dalid and the gimel are going to be the avos and the imahos, the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which is the gimel of dag, and the dalid, which is going to be Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. This corresponds to the shemos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the 4 permutations of Shem Havaya, of Absag Ma'ben, and the 3 permutations of the Shem Eke, of Kasa, Kama, and Kanag. And this dag on Shabbos that the Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk wanted to partake of, the secret of the Suda of Levyasan, the secret of drawing down das, of awareness of redemption into a person's mind, in that Suda of the Levyasan, which is where we actually experience it through Pnimius HaTorah, that we're able to refine this worldliness and transform it into a garden to reveal the redemption that is always already present in it. So Rav Menachem Mendel went out to the Kinneret. Rav Menachem Mendel took a small boat out and he went into the middle of the Kinneret. And he stood up in the middle of the boat and he says, Ale dag. He says, fish, arise. And the fish didn't arise. He said, Ale dag, fish, arise. And the fish didn't arise. He says, Ale dag, the third time, and a big fish jumps out of the sea and it lands on the boat, splashing Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk with water. And Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk laughs and he says, look how tremendously profound the light of this land is. Look how profoundly illuminated this place of redemption is, of Toiva Haaretz Ma'oid. In Chutz La'aretz, when I went out to get a fish, all I had to do was say Ale dag once. All I had to say is this fish should come up, and it came up. And here I have to ask 3 times, and still it's not without bezyonos and embarrassment. Because the light of Eretz Yisrael, the light of Toiv Haaretz Ma'oid, is the Ma'oid Have Shafar Ruach, the recognition that all I have is Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. All I have is Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. All I have is Moshe, Aaron, David, Shlomo, and Yosef. That's all I have. All I have is the Shiva Haroim. All I have are the Ushpiz and Kaddish, and I borrow those gifts. I borrow it from the beggars in the forest. We borrow the light of sustainability. We borrow the light, the gift, like the lost children in the forest who don't know which way is out and which way is up and which way is down. They're lost, they're impoverished, they're suffering. Everything has changed. And they borrow the lights. They borrow the lights of the Sheva HaBatlarim, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. All of those midos kadoshos that we borrow from the tzaddikim that give us the koyach, the tools of redemption. And the beggars say, you should be like me. You should learn how to live with these lights yourself in Mirz Hashem. Until you can learn how to do it, you borrow it. You borrow it from the tzaddikim. You borrow it from the face of the tzaddikim. And then at the chasana, at the Sheva HaBatlarim, they come back and they give it to us as a gift. Then we earn it. But for now, we have to borrow. For now, we have to borrow. And that's the only way to go over the Gesher Tzar Ma'od Ma'od. And the Ma'aseh of Rav Menachem Mendel Vitebsk that most of what we're going to be discussing is based on is as follows. That when Rav Menachem Mendel went to the town of Tveria, Rav Menachem Mendel lived in the town of Tveria, a place that is ripe for redemption, a place of water, a place of purity, a place of refinement, a place of air, a place of Rashbi, a place of Tahir Shuke Tveria, that Rashbi went down to the lower parts of Tveria to refine that place of the suffix of Tumas Misa, that poisonous stench of potential death and impurity, and to refine it, to clarify it, to make certain that there's Kedusha in the world. And in that place of Tveria, that place of the Tibur, that place where the lights are revealed, so we're told that Mashiach is going to come from that place. And there was excitement that something had happened in Yerushalayim. There was somebody who blew a shofar. And ultimately news had come to Tveria that Mashiach had arrived. News had come that Mashiach had come. And the students of Rav Menachem Mendel Vitebsk were hearing all of the murmurings in the Shuke Tveria, in the Shuk, in the marketplaces of Tveria, and they came running to their Rebbe. They went up to their Rebbe's study. And they said, Rebbe, they're seeing that Mashiach Tzidkenu has arrived. They're seeing that Mashiach Tzidkenu has arrived, that redemption is here. Anavim, ma'od ma'od havishafarach, higi azman. And Rav Menachem Mendel very, very calmly stands up from a place that he was sitting, closes the book that he was reading, walks over to the window at the side of his office, puts his head outside of the window, takes a smell, an inhale through the nose, Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem, turns back to his students, and he says, Mashiach has not yet arrived, go back to your service. And he sits back down and he starts being engaged in his avodah again. Afterwards, it was asked why it was that Rav Menachem Mendel needed to put his head out of the window in order to determine whether redemption had arrived. And the answer given is that for Rav Menachem Mendel in his room, in the light of the Vitebsker's room, in the light of the Vitebsker's study, Mashiach Tzidkenu had already arrived. As we know from the Tzaddikim, as we know from the Leshem, Shabbat V'chaloima, and from the Gra, everything that's going to be revealed in the future is already revealed right now. And the secret of Zashem Kivinu Lo, that what I can borrow right now is what's going to bring me to the future itself. And I borrow it even though I don't see it. I trust that it's here even though I don't feel it. And I live in that mindset even though I don't have it. And redemption arrives to a person when they decide that redemption arrives. And in the room of the Vitebsker, redemption had arrived. Sitting there with his book, sitting there with his kavanah, sitting there with his intention, and his okayness and his enoughness. And all of the elements that we can only imagine a tzaddik being capable of experiencing. And all of us are of Menachem Mendel Ma'aseh. In that place, Mashiach has already arrived. And the fact that Mashiach hasn't arrived on the outside yet doesn't mean that Mashiach hasn't arrived on the inside yet. A person can live with moments of internal calmness in spite of the fact that the outside is still not yet there. In spite of the fact that we're still not yet at the Kretschma, in spite of the fact that we're still not yet at that inn, like Udal, the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, who's demanding from her father when it continues to be more difficult and more difficult, says, what's going to help us get there until we get there? And that's the secret of the room of the Vitebsker, that place of being able to draw in a deep breath and say, Mashiach is here right now. In this moment, I'm okay. In this moment, I am okay. In this moment, everything is okay. In this moment, things are okay. In this moment, the things that I am in control of are okay. In this moment, the things that I've tried to fix that I can't fix are not my responsibility to fix anymore. The things that I'm not in control of are not my responsibility to be in control of. I need not lose my center for the sake of the perception of the rest of the world that's lost its center. And for a moment, the person can allow themselves to attach themselves to the innermost point of Das, to that point of Mashiach within themselves, to that point of the room of the Vitebsker that exists in the mind of each and every individual. Right over here, each and every person has a room of the Vitebsker. Each and every person has the Meshugana, who announces that Mashiach has arrived, who blows the shofar prematurely and says, I've gotten there. Each person has the people running around in the shook of their mind saying, is it true? Is it true? Is redemption here? Can I possibly be okay? Each person has the eager Talmidim who are running. Maybe I can be okay, but let me run to my tzaddik. Let me run to the place of Dasa Amiti to identify whether that's truly something I can feel right now. And each person has the tzaddik, each person has the Rav Menachem Mendel in that room of Rav Menachem Mendel in their mind, that room, that cheder penima, that kodesh hakadashim, that makom ha'aron einam and amida, that mibein shnei akruvim, that place of the das of Moshe, of the ma'od ma'od haveshafa ruach, of tov ha'aretz ma'od ma'od, of the gesher tzar ma'od ma'od. And in that place, a person can tap into the fact that in spite of the fact that the air outside is still stale, nevertheless, in here, Mashiach has already arrived. And the goal of drawing down more moments of calmness, the goal of reorienting ourselves is not to rest there without activism. It's to tap into that place and to go out with more force. It's to tap into the place of redemption of the spirit and to grow and extend the parameters and the perimeters of my spiritual experience in this world and to expand the territories of my emunah and to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu where I previously did not see him and to have more of a hasaga of bilti musag and to know more that I can't know and to tap into the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of knowing that I can't tap into it. And in that very inability to tap into it, I'm mamish tapping into it. Elav mamish b'derech midosav. And in that way, I can illuminate my mind with an element of redemption. I can taste my world in my days. I can be okay. A person lives once. I can be okay in this moment. I can be calm. I can be patient. I can overcome. And in that place, Mashiach arrives perpetually when we learn that there's a room. There's a room in the mind of Rav Menachem Mendel Vitebsker's study. And there's a stender in the mind in that place where Mashiach has already arrived. And there's a lock on that door. And there's a lock, there's a man'ol on that door, and we have to learn the mafteach for that key. We have to learn the mafteach, the key necessary for getting through that lock. And as we're going to see in these series of classes, very much what the Baal Sulam teaches us, which is that the mafteach is the man'ol, and the man'ol is the mafteach. The lock is the key, and the key is the lock. That buried within the lock itself is hidden the key. Buried within the experience of this worldly concealment is the key of redemption in this moment itself, of karvel nafshi giyala. Be'ezras Hashem, we should be zoichet to menuchas hanefesh, to yeshiva das, so that we have the capacity to daven for the real things that need to be davened for the coming of Mashiach, for the redemption of Klal Yisrael, for the redemption of Eretz Yisrael, for the redemption of Nishmas Yisrael, for the redemption of Torah Yisrael, for the redemption of Geula Shlema b'mhira b'yameinu b'karov mamish be'ezras Hashem.